It had been 15 years since anyone had come to see him. Javon Myers sat motionless at the edge of the steel bench, bolted to the concrete floor of the Georgia State Correctional Facility's visiting room. The thick plexiglass window in front of him hadn't had a single smudge in over a decade, until today. His palms left damp impressions on the surface as he waited, stiff-backed and unreadable, eyes fixed on the security door across the room. He didn't believe it when the guards told him. "You got a visitor," they'd said, sounding surprised. Nobody ever visited Javon. Not since his grandmother passed. Not since his public defender forgot his name during trial. Not since the day the judge sentenced him to 25 years for a murder he never meant to commit. But today someone came. Someone claiming to be his mother. He didn't remember her. Not really. Just flashes. A woman with a headscarf and tired eyes. The smell of baby oil and cigarette smoke. She left when he was 4. Some said she died. Others whispered she'd run off with a man from Alabama. Javon stopped asking around age 8. By 12, he had learned that missing people don't come back. They just become holes you learn to walk around. And yet there she was. She entered through the side door slowly, like her knees were remembering how to move. A pale yellow dress hung off her thin frame. Her hair, gray at the roots, was pinned into a neat bun. She looked too composed, like she'd rehearsed this moment in her mind too many times and now didn't know what to do with it. Their eyes met. She hesitated, just for a second, just long enough for Javon to feel it. Then she stepped forward, picked up the phone on her side of the glass, and waited. Javon didn't move. He just stared at her, this woman with soft wrinkles under her eyes and a silver chain around her neck that glinted like it didn't belong here. This woman who called herself Marjorie Myers. Finally, he picked up the receiver. "Say it," he said, voice low and flat. Her lips trembled. "Javon, I'm sorry, baby. I know it's been a long time." He didn't blink. "Who are you?" She swallowed. "I'm your mother." "No, you're not," he said, just as calmly. "My mother died when I was 4. You? I don't know you." Marjorie looked down, her fingers tightening around the plastic phone receiver. "I didn't die. I left. I know that doesn't make it better, but I had to." "You had to?" Javon chuckled darkly. "You had to leave your kid behind in a crack house neighborhood with a sick grandmother and a broken school system? You had to disappear for 15 F asterisk 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 in years." "Please," she whispered. "Let me explain." He leaned in, his breath fogging the glass. "Then explain. Right here. Right now." Marjorie reached into her purse and pulled out a worn envelope, pressed it against the glass. It held a birth certificate, old and creased. Javon stared at it. "Your name," she said softly, "your name is on it. Javon Marcus Myers." His jaw clenched. "Marcus? That was my name. Before." He frowned. "Before?" Marjorie looked away, the silence stretching between them like a noose. "I wasn't always Marjorie. I was born Marcus. Marcus Aaron Myers. I transitioned after you were born. That's part of why I left. I didn't know how to tell you, or how to stay." Javon didn't respond. Not with words. Not with anything. His face emptied out, and for a moment he was gone. Somewhere far away, a little boy waiting by a window for a mother who'd never come. A teenager getting jumped outside a 7-Eleven, wiping blood from his lip, wondering why no one ever showed up to pick him up from school. A man in orange prison clothes wondering why the hell he was even alive. "I loved you," she said, tears welling up. "I've always loved you, Javon." The receiver in his hand creaked under pressure. And then he hung it up. He stood. Marjorie's eyes widened. Javon turned to the guard by the wall and nodded. "I'm done." The guard raised an eyebrow, but walked over to unlock the door. As Javon was led away, he didn't look back. He didn't say another word. But in his mind, something had cracked wide open. Because in that room, In that moment, the only person who ever claimed to love him had just revealed they weren't who he thought they were. Not his mother, not a woman, just a lie that grew up into a ghost and came back too late. She sat in her car for nearly an hour after the visit. The engine was off, the windows fogged with each shaky breath she exhaled. Her hands trembled in her lap, fingers nervously tracing the outline of a tiny photograph she kept folded in her wallet. A boy for years old, with big eyes and a smile too wide for his face. Javon, before everything. She hadn't expected him to recognize her. But the hatred in his eyes that had hurt more than anything. Marjorie, no, Marcus, in his mind, had imagined that moment for years. Rehearsed every version of it. The tearful reconciliation. The angry outburst followed by forgiveness. Even a silent nod of understanding. But she hadn't prepared for the look he actually gave her. Hollow, as if she were nothing. Maybe that's what she deserved. It was hard to explain to anyone on the outside. People who hadn't lived her life couldn't grasp it. Back then, in the late 80s and early 90s, being trans, especially in the South, wasn't something you said out loud. It wasn't something you admitted. Not to yourself. Not to God. And certainly not to your child. Marcus Aaron Myers had been a man most of his life. A quiet, studious boy from Savannah. A musician. A churchgoer. Someone who followed the rules. But there was always a dissonance inside him. Something he couldn't name. Until he met Andre. Andre was a storm. A black queer man in Georgia who didn't care what the world thought. He introduced Marcus to books, art, language, desire. And for the first time, Marcus saw himself in reflections he had never dared to look at before. He didn't just want Andre. He wanted to be something freer, something beyond what his family and church had written in stone. It didn't last. Andre left after 2 years, chasing a teaching job in Seattle. Marcus stayed and unraveled. That was when he made the decision. It had been controversial even in the LGBTQ community, a transgender man choosing to detransition medically just so he could carry a child. It wasn't something anyone did lightly. But Marcus had already been taking testosterone for years. He stopped cold, endured the changes back, his voice softening, hips widening, periods returning with a vengeance. He hated every second of it, but it was the only way. He didn't want to adopt. He didn't want a surrogate. He wanted a child that was his. Someone he could pour his truth into. Someone who would never feel unloved the way he had. And then Javon was born. The first time she held him, still Marcus then, she cried so hard she thought her lungs would collapse. He was perfect. She named him after herself, middle name and all. But she wasn't prepared for motherhood, or for the looks she got when she brought her baby to the pediatrician. The way nurses whispered. The way her family stopped talking to her altogether. She could handle being hated. She could not handle being feared. She stayed until he was 4, until the day Javon stood in the living room, looked up, and called her mommy in front of her landlord. And the landlord had laughed. "You got a mom with a beard, boy," he'd said. That laugh stuck in her ears for years. She packed that night and left before dawn. Her mother took the boy in. She promised herself she'd come back when she had her life together. She just needed time to fix her body, fix her mind, fix whatever was broken in her. But time didn't work like that. Every year made it harder. And every year, she watched Javon from a distance. There were nights she parked across the street from his school just to see him running at recess. She left presents on the porch on his birthdays. Books, a pair of sneakers, a harmonica once. He never knew who sent them. But by the time she got clean, by the time she finally transitioned into Marjorie fully and legally, Javon was gone. Incarcerated at 19 for killing a man in a drug deal gone sideways. She didn't even find out until the 3rd year of his sentence. She cried for days, but fear held her back. What would he say? Would he even let her speak? Then came the diagnosis, thyroid cancer, aggressive. 6 months, maybe less. That's when she knew. If she didn't tell him now, she never would. And now, maybe it was too late anyway. Her phone buzzed in her lap. A message from the clinic. Biopsy confirmed. Stage 4. We recommend beginning palliative care. Please call to schedule an appointment. Marjorie put the phone down slowly. She looked in the rearview mirror. Her face was a stranger's. The years had changed everything. Her skin looked tired. Her eyes, once sharp, now seemed watery and unsure. She wasn't a mother. She wasn't even a good person. She was just a story that had gone off script. And Javon? He was the only thing she ever did right. Until she lost him, too. She unfolded the picture in her lap again, ran her fingers along the smile. Then she pressed the photo to her chest and sobbed so quietly that even the car didn't hear. Back inside the prison, Javon lay in his bunk, staring at the concrete ceiling. The cell was cold, the light overhead flickering like it was dying too. He couldn't sleep. That woman's face haunted him, not because she claimed to be his mother, but because, deep down, something in her eyes looked like his. He hated that more than anything. He hated that he couldn't unsee it. When Marjorie was still Marcus, the world made more sense, at least on the surface. He had a job detailing cars, a one-bedroom apartment above a closed-down laundromat, and a routine that kept the noise in his head at bay. Church on Sundays, jazz on Saturdays, and beer with the boys on paydays. It was a life people didn't question, and for someone like Marcus, blending in was survival. But even as he played the part of the respectable black man, he carried a silence so heavy it nearly bent his spine. The silence had a name. It lived in his bones. It whispered things he was raised to believe were evil. Growing up in a Southern Baptist home, Marcus was told God made no mistakes, and yet he felt like one every time he looked in a mirror. The first time he ever kissed a man, he was 24. His name was Andre, and he smelled like clove cigarettes and peppermint oil. They met at a poetry reading in Savannah. Andre had the kind of laugh that made people turn heads. He was bold, magnetic, and completely unafraid of himself. Everything Marcus wasn't. Andre made Marcus feel seen for the first time in his life. It wasn't just about sex. It was about possibility. For a while, they carved out a quiet world together. Rented a place with old wooden floors and too many stairs. Watched late-night TV and cooked pasta that was always too salty. It was fragile and flawed and beautiful. But Marcus never stopped hiding. He wouldn't hold Andre's hand in public. He used gender-neutral pronouns when talking about him at work. And he never introduced him to family. One night, Andre came home drunk and said, "You still think you're a man just playing dress-up, huh?" Marcus didn't answer. Andre packed up and left the next morning. The apartment never felt like home again. Marcus tried dating women after that. Tried living straight. He even got engaged once to a nurse named Vanessa who wanted 3 kids and a golden retriever. She smelled like baby powder and told him he had strong hands. He almost believed he could be that person for her. But the lie didn't hold. Late at night, Marcus found himself Googling phrases like "can trans men get pregnant" and "testosterone pregnancy reversal." He didn't tell anyone, not even his therapist. The idea sounded insane even to him, but he was desperate to hold on to something real, something that was his and couldn't leave. He lost Andre, lost his identity, lost his voice, but a child could anchor him. He went off hormones. Slowly, painfully, the hair on his chest thinned. His voice cracked back into something softer. His periods returned with a fury that made him vomit from cramps. His body became a battleground again, but he kept going. He found a sperm donor through an underground LGBTQ network. A white graduate student from Atlanta who never asked questions, just signed the papers. Marcus never told him anything beyond first name. And 9 months later, Javon Marcus Myers came screaming into the world at 2:17 a.m. in a women's clinic that made no eye contact and asked no questions. The nurses didn't know what to call Marcus on the chart, so they wrote "mother" with a question mark. That question mark burned more than any labor pain. But when they handed him the baby, everything else faded. Javon was perfect, a full head of hair, wide eyes, fingers that curled around Marcus's thumb like a promise. He looked into that tiny face and whispered, "You're mine, and I'm going to do better for you." For a while, he did. He breastfed. He bathed. He sang lullabies in a low, shaky voice. He taught himself how to braid hair even though it made his wrists ache. He was more of a mother than most women in his neighborhood had ever seen. But the world wasn't ready. At the grocery store, strangers stared at his flat chest and baby sling. At the pediatrician's office, he was called sir in the waiting room and ma'am in the exam room. When he tried enrolling Javon in daycare, the administrator leaned in and whispered, "We don't have the facilities for situations like yours." And then there was the day at the laundromat. Javon had dropped a toy car and crawled under a bench to retrieve it. A woman standing nearby glanced over and said to her friend, "That baby don't even got a real mama. Just a man playing pretend." Marcus didn't react. He didn't say a word. He just folded the clothes, strapped his baby in the carrier, and walked out. Later that night, he stared at his reflection in the mirror and saw someone he didn't recognize. He wasn't a man. He wasn't a woman. He was a glitch in the system, a parent with no name. So he made a decision. He left Javon with his mother, an old, bitter woman who never truly accepted him but loved the boy. He packed what little he had and vanished from Savannah like smoke from a kitchen fire. He thought it would only be for a year, maybe 2. He thought he'd come back stronger, healthier, more stable. But time slipped. He moved from town to town, changed names, worked odd jobs, transitioned again, this time not as Marcus reclaiming masculinity, but as Marjorie trying to be human, trying to live in a body that felt safe. She got clean, found work as a clerk in a dental office, wore skirts, and tried to laugh at sitcoms she didn't find funny. Some days were good, some nights weren't. But Javon? He was always there, in her mind, in her chest, in her gut. She kept a box in her closet. Inside, a baby shoe, a lock of hair, a hand-drawn picture that read, "I love you, Mom." She didn't know how he even remembered her long enough to draw that. And then the cancer came. The doctor said 6 months, maybe a year. And for once, she didn't feel fear, just clarity. If she was going to die, her son had to know. He had to hear it. From her. Even if he hated her. Even if he called her a monster. Because silence was what broke them. And the only way to fix it, even a little, was to speak. The next day, she came back. Same dress. Same soft hands shaking as she clutched her purse. Same look in her eyes, like she was trying to remember how to be brave. Marjorie had called ahead, asked the prison staff for another visit, said she had something important to give him. They hesitated at first. After all, Javon hadn't exactly been welcoming yesterday. But she insisted, and she begged, so they let her in. Javon didn't want to go. When the guard told him, he laughed and said, "For what? She want to die in front of me now." But curiosity's a cruel thing in a man with too many locked doors inside. He agreed. When he walked into the visiting room, his fists were already clenched. She was sitting in the same chair, same spot, like she hadn't moved since yesterday. When she saw him, she smiled gently, but it barely reached her eyes. This time, he didn't sit. He just stood on his side of the glass, glaring. "You came back," he said flatly. Marjorie nodded, picking up the phone. "I had to." Javon picked up his end, but didn't lift it to his ear. "If you say one more lie, I swear." "No more lies," she cut in. Her voice was fragile, tired, like she'd aged 20 years overnight. "Only truth now." There was a pause. Then she pulled something from her purse. A folded letter, handwritten, thick with ink and emotion. "I wrote this last night," she said, "in case you didn't come." He still didn't sit. "I just wanted you to know everything. All of it. No more half-truths. No more hiding. You deserve the whole story." Javon looked down at the paper, still not touching the receiver. "You lied about who you are," he said. "You lied about being my mother. You lied about even being a woman." "I lied because I was scared," she said. "Scared you'd hate me. Scared I'd lose the only good thing I ever made." "You left me," he hissed. "I know. You left me in hell. I know." Something in his hand twitched. He still hadn't sat down. His whole body was rigid, as if holding himself back from lunging through the glass. "Do you know what it's like," he said slowly, "to cry for someone every night? To hope every noise outside is your mama coming back?" Her eyes welled up, but she didn't speak. "I killed a man when I was 19, he went on. "Shot him in the face because he tried to take my chain. You know why? Because it was the only thing I had left from you. And I wasn't going to let anyone take that from me, too." Marjorie covered her mouth. "I've been in here for 10 ing years," he whispered, voice cracking. "And the whole time, I thought I was born from love. From a woman who disappeared because the world was cruel. I prayed to you in my head, like you were still out there." She started to cry, and then, with a sudden motion, he lifted the phone. "But you weren't even her," he said, barely above a whisper. "You weren't even real." Marjorie reached her hand to the glass. "I am real, Javon. I'm more real than I've ever been. And I love you. I never stop." "Shut up," he said. He dropped the phone. His right hand slipped into the waistband of his prison trousers, pulled out a small, sharpened object. A pen. One of the ballpoints from the commissary. Shaved down to a point. Illegal. Homemade. Hidden for years. The guard didn't notice. Not in time. Javon lunged forward. He didn't go through the glass. He slammed the pen into his own shoulder hard. Blood spurted. Marjorie screamed. The guard jumped, fumbled to open the door. In that split second, while everyone looked the wrong way, Javon pulled out the hidden blade taped onto the visitor's desk. Something he had stashed weeks earlier during cleaning shift. Something he had forgotten until yesterday reminded him that the world lies. He circled around the divider fast. Too fast. The guard yelled, but Javon was already at her. Marjorie turned to run, but it was too late. The first stab went into her neck. The second, under her chin. She gasped, wet, broken, animal-like. "Liar," he roared. "You lied to me my whole life." Blood sprayed across the beige linoleum. It hit the wall, the glass, his own shirt. The third, fourth, fifth. By then, she was crumpled on the floor. Her arms flailed weakly. Her eyes were wide with shock. She didn't even cry out. He stabbed her again, and again, until the blade bent. The room erupted. Guards tackled him, pulled him off, fist flying. Someone was shouting over the intercom, "Medical! Medical!" But it was too late. She was gone. Her body was still. Her blouse soaked through. The letter lay on the floor beside her, fluttering in the cold prison air. Javon was dragged back, kicking, screaming, covered in her blood. And all he kept shouting was the same thing, over and over again. "That wasn't my mother. That wasn't my mother." The blood had barely dried on the linoleum when the story went national. "Inmate kills mother in visiting room." That was the first headline. Cold, clinical, designed to shock. Then came the twist. Transgender mother stabbed to death by son after revealing she was born male. That one lit the fuse. The story spread like wildfire. Local news, regional affiliates, then the big ones, CNN, Fox, MSNBC. The right called it gender deception leading to violence. The left called it hate-fueled filicide born from societal ignorance. Talk shows debated it. YouTubers milked it. Hashtags flooded Twitter. Hashtag justice for Marjorie. Hashtag he was never her son. Hashtag gender truth matters. Hashtag, this is what happens. And in the middle of all that noise was Javon Myers, silent, shackled, and smeared with the blood of the only person who had ever claimed to love him. The prison moved him to solitary confinement for his own protection, not because anyone wanted to hurt him, but because he wouldn't stop screaming in his sleep. At first, he refused to talk. No interviews, no lawyers, no chaplains. He ate in silence, slept in bursts, and stared at the ceiling like it owed him answers. It wasn't until his public defender, a thin woman with sharp glasses and zero tolerance for drama, placed a recording device on the table and said, "They're going to twist your story however they want, Javon, unless you speak." He leaned forward, handcuffed, eyes hollow. "I didn't kill a woman," he said. "I killed a lie." The lawyer didn't flinch. "She was your mother. She was never my mother." He spoke slowly, each word dropping like lead. "My mother was someone I made up in my head, someone I prayed to when I was cold, when the older boys tried to touch me, when I saw my grandma stop breathing on the kitchen floor. That woman, that stranger, she wasn't the one I prayed to. You stabbed her 26 times. She let me believe I had a mother. She let me become a man in this world without telling me where I came from. She could have told me when I was 5, or 10, or 18. But no, she came in here, right into this hell, and dumped the truth on me like a goddamn funeral." His voice cracked. "I was born from confusion," he said. "That's all I am. Confusion wearing a name." The public defender didn't say anything for a long time. She just turned off the recorder and looked at him like she'd finally understood the hole he lived in. Outside the prison, the world picked sides. Evangelical talk shows claimed it was proof of what they called the dangers of gender lies. They played Javon's mugshot over ominous music, called him a victim of liberal society, a child warped by a culture of secrets. Meanwhile, LGBTQ plus advocates held candlelight vigils for Marjorie in Atlanta, Chicago, San Francisco. They read aloud parts of the letter she never got to deliver. They called her brave, complicated, human. Some blamed her. Others forgave her. No one agreed. One news anchor on national TV asked, "If you lie to someone about your identity for their entire life, do you forfeit their trust? Their love? And if so, how far does that betrayal go?" The internet had answers. So did the court. The trial was set for early fall. By then, Javon had grown gaunt. His once athletic frame sagged. His eyes looked older than his age. But when the cameras rolled, he straightened up and told the jury exactly what he told his lawyer. "She wasn't my mom," he said. "She was a man pretending to be something she wasn't. And I spent my whole life in prison, the first half outside these walls, the second half inside. All because of that lie." The prosecution painted him as cold, dangerous, filled with hate. The defense framed him as a child abandoned, betrayed, raised by ghosts and shadows. They brought in psychologists who testified about trauma-induced dissociation and gender betrayal psychosis. But the most haunting testimony came from Javon himself. "She came back into my life just to die in front of me," he said on the stand. "I didn't kill her because she was trans. I killed her because she stole my entire life from me and then showed up with a smile like I was supposed to clap." The courtroom was silent. Outside, people protested. Others prayed. Someone lit a small cross on fire in the parking lot. No one ever claimed responsibility. In the end, the jury was split on motive but unanimous on guilt. Second-degree murder. Life without parole. The judge read the sentence with a heavy voice. "May God have mercy on your soul." Javon didn't react. He just stared at the floor, where a drop of his mother's blood had once splattered on his shoes. He hadn't cleaned them, not out of pride, but because he didn't know what parts of her still lived on him. And he didn't know if he wanted them gone. The trial started under gray skies and heavier tension. By 8 a.m. on opening day, news vans had already taken over the courthouse lawn. Protesters stood behind barricades waving signs. On one side, trans lives matter. On the other, truth is not hate. Inside courtroom 2B, the state of Georgia versus Javon Marcus Myers began. He entered in shackles, wrists, and ankles, dressed in a charcoal suit 2 sizes too big. His eyes scanned the room once, then looked down and never came back up. The prosecution wasted no time painting him as a cold-blooded killer. This was not a moment of passion, the district attorney declared. This was a calculated act. Mr. Myers brought a weapon. He lured his victim back for a second visit, and he delivered 26 stab wounds, many of them post-mortem. That is not grief. That is rage. They played the prison surveillance footage for the jury. No audio, but sharp visuals. The moment Marjorie leaned toward the glass, Javon standing, the blur of movement, blood spreading across tile, a guard slipping in it, chaos. Some jurors looked away. Others stared, numb. When the prosecution called their medical examiner, she delivered the blunt facts. 6 stab wounds to the neck, 5 to the chest, 9 to the face, multiple defensive wounds on the victim's hands. The nature of the attack was personal, she said. Intimate. The killer wanted to erase the face. That word, erase, hung in the air like cigarette smoke. Then it was the defense's turn. They didn't argue the facts. Not the stabbing. Not the hiding of the weapon. Not the rage. What they argued was why. They opened with Javon's childhood, the abandonment, the years in foster care, the neighborhood that buried boys before they hit 16. He grew up thinking his mother had died, the defense attorney said, then learned she had not, that she had chosen to leave. And not just that, she had lied to him about who she was, down to her very identity. They introduced Dr. Alina Carter, a trauma psychologist who'd spent weeks interviewing Javon. He experienced what's called identity collapse, she explained. Imagine building your entire self around the belief that you were born from love, and then discovering, in one moment, that everything about that love was based on omission and reinvention. The jury listened in silence. Some nodded. Others stiffened. The prosecution rebutted fiercely. So you're saying he killed her because of a feeling? I'm saying he killed because the foundation of who he thought he was cracked beneath him, Dr. Carter answered. And when you've been in prison half your life, trust and truth are not philosophical questions. They're survival tools. He lost both. Then came the most polarizing testimony of the trial. A former corrections officer, Officer Tay Washington, was called by the prosecution. He'd spoken to Javon the day after the murder. He told me, straight up, Tay testified that he didn't regret it. Said she was a fraud. Said if he had to do it again, he would. Just quieter. Gasps in the courtroom. The defense challenged it immediately. Do you have that on record? No. It was informal. Then it's hearsay. Maybe. But I know what I heard. The judge allowed the jury to consider it, but warned them of its nature. Then came the letter. The one Marjorie had brought with her. Still folded, still stained with blood. The prosecution read it aloud. Dear Javon, I know I've waited too long. I know what I did was unforgivable. But I hope that one day, even after I'm gone, you'll see me not as a lie, but as a person who made a choice out of fear. I loved you with every breath I ever took, even when I didn't have the courage to show it. You were not born in shame. You were born in hope. I just didn't know how to tell you. I'm sorry. Mom, Marjorie, always. The courtroom was still when it ended. Even the court reporter had a pause, wiping tears from her keyboard. Javon stared straight ahead, not blinking, not breathing. Then the prosecution brought their final witness, Marjorie's sister, Denise. She stood tall in a navy blue blazer. Her voice never cracked. She was complicated, Denise said, but she was kind, and she was trying to do right before she died. She came back to tell the truth. She knew it would hurt him, but she came anyway. That's courage. The jury took 3 days. They came back with a verdict. Guilty of second-degree murder. No chance of parole. The courtroom didn't cheer, didn't erupt. It just sat in silence. Outside, the media tore each other apart. Some called it justice. Others called it a hate crime with legal approval. Social media exploded. Trans rights organizations decried the verdict. Conservative pundits framed it as a victory against gender deception. Late-night hosts joked. Podcasts dissected. TikToks reenacted the stabbing for clout. But in prison, none of that noise reached Javon. He sat in a new cell, alone again. Same steel sink. Same flickering light. Same dreams where a child waits at a window for a mother who never comes. And sometimes he would whisper something at night. Just once. Low and cracked. Not mom. Not why. Just a name he never got to say aloud when it mattered. Marjorie. The story eventually faded from the headlines. Another school shooting. Another celebrity scandal. Another election year scandal. America's attention moved on, like it always does. But inside the walls of Georgia State Correctional Facility, Javon Myers still lived. Not really alive. Not really dead. Just suspended. Between concrete and memory. Between the sound of a woman's voice and the echo of his own silence. They moved him to the medical unit 6 months after the trial. He'd stopped eating. Lost 30 pounds. Talked to himself at night. The guards called it mental fatigue. The nurses called it a slow unraveling. No one used the word grief. Not for him. He didn't deserve it. Not after what he did. But behind closed doors, in the quiet hours when the fluorescent lights buzzed low and the cell block was sleeping, Javon sometimes pulled that letter from under his mattress, the blood-stained one, still creased, still damp at the edges, and read it again. He couldn't explain why he kept it. Maybe because it was the only thing she'd ever written just for him. Maybe because it was the only proof that she existed at all. Outside the screams, outside the courtroom, outside the lie. He never read out loud. Just traced the words with his finger like he was memorizing the rhythm of her handwriting. Like he was trying to hear her voice again without remembering the gurgling sound it made at the end. Outside prison walls, her name resurfaced occasionally. Marjorie Myers, transgender parent, victim of filicide, the face of too little, too late. In Atlanta, an LGBTQ youth shelter was named in her honor, the Marjorie House. They provided beds for teens who'd been disowned by families that couldn't understand them. On the wall hung a plaque, for those who speak too late and those still learning how. A Netflix docuseries came next. Episode 5, My Mother, My Father, My Killer. It painted Marjorie as a tragic figure, a pioneer, a victim of shame and generational pain. Javon was blurred in most clips, except for his voice, raw and shaking. She made me from the one part of herself she hated and then left me alone with it. The show went viral. Opinions clashed. Some viewers cried. Others raged. But a quiet percentage, older black men especially, said nothing at all. Because the pain hit too close. Because they'd been raised in houses where softness got you beaten. Where silence was survival. Where nobody ever asked, "Who are you, really?" In year 3 of his life sentence, Javon requested therapy. Not because he wanted to get better, but because the dreams were getting worse. Every night, he saw her. Sometimes as Marcus, a tall, quiet man with sad eyes. Sometimes as Marjorie, thin, trembling, holding out her arms. But always with the same expression. "I'm sorry." And he never answered. His therapist, a retired Navy chaplain named Wallace, asked him once, "Do you believe in forgiveness?" Javon shrugged. "Don't know." "Do you believe she loved you?" Another shrug. "Guess so." "What do you believe about yourself?" That time, Javon said nothing, just stared at the floor. The following week, he brought the letter with him, laid it on the table without a word. Wallace read it in silence, then slid it back, saying only, She didn't know how to love you the way you needed. But it doesn't mean she didn't try. That night, for the first time, Javon wept. No screaming. No violence. No guards being called. Just tears. Shaking. Silent. Tears for the woman he hated. For the truth he wasn't ready for. For the child he used to be, the one still waiting by the window. 5 years after the murder, Denise Myers agreed to speak publicly for the first time. She hadn't wanted to. For years, she'd ignored the phone calls, turned down every request from journalists, documentarians, even a therapist hired by the Marjorie house. The dead don't need voices, she used to say. They already got silence. But something shifted. Maybe it was the anniversary. Maybe it was the letter Javon sent. Maybe it was the whisper of Marjorie's name every time she passed the closed piano in her living room. So she said yes to one interview. One night only. A small podcast based out of Atlanta. No makeup. No script. Just her voice. She wore a navy blazer and a plain gold pin. Marjorie's old church brooch. Her hands trembled when she took the mic. "I don't know what y'all want me to say," she began. "You want me to say my sister was a saint? She wasn't. You want me to say Javon's a monster? He ain't that either. This story ain't about good and evil. It's about damage." She paused, eyes glassy. "She was Marcus when we were kids. My baby brother. Could play Chopin by ear at 8. Scared of frogs. Loved pickles. And he was gentle. So damn gentle." Her voice cracked. When she told me she was transitioning, I said the wrong thing. I said, "You sure this ain't a phase?" And she just nodded, real quiet, like she expected that. And you know what's worse? After Javon was born, I told her, "If you tell him who you are, he'll hate you." Denise turned toward the camera. I told her to lie. There was silence. I thought I was protecting her. Maybe I was. Maybe I wasn't. But now she's in the ground. And he's in a cage. And I'm the one breathing. So don't ask me to forgive. Don't ask me to forget. Just let me carry what's mine. The host tried to ask a follow-up. Denise raised a hand. I got one more thing to say. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small velvet pouch. Inside was a harmonica, rusted old. Marjorie left this for Javon when he turned 7. She put in a box with a note. Never signed it. Said maybe one day he'd figure out. She placed it on the table. I don't know what the hell any of us were trying to do, but we did it wrong. All of us. Later that week, Denise was seen standing alone at Marjorie's grave. She brought no flowers, just a folded lawn chair and a thermos of coffee. She sat there for hours. Once, she was heard whispering something through the wind. I told you not to tell him, but maybe you were right to try. In his 10th year behind bars, on the day he turned 39, Javon did something no one expected. He wrote a letter, addressed to the Marjorie house. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He didn't explain himself. He just enclosed one sentence. "I hope someone like me walks through your door and hears the truth before it's too late." They framed it, put it right beside the plaque. A boy in a cage, sending a whisper into the world. No name, no judgment, just silence, and the legacy it left behind. At first, no one noticed the letter. It was framed and hung beside the plaque at the Marjorie house, small, simple, tucked just above eye level. Most visitors thought it was just a quote. Another sad reminder of a tragedy they'd seen on the news. But then, one day, a 17-year-old named Cale read it. He stood under the frame for nearly 10 minutes, lips moving softly as he traced the sentence with his finger. "I hope someone like me walks through your door and hears the truth before it's too late." That night, Cale asked the staff if he could write back. He didn't know where Javon was. He didn't even know if he was allowed to send a letter to a murderer. But he wrote anyway. "I don't forgive you. I'm not sure I ever could. But I needed to see that sentence. Because my father came out as a woman when I was 13, and I've hated her every day since. But now I don't know if I still do. Thanks, I guess." The staff debated whether to forward it. In the end, they sent it to the warden of Georgia State Correctional Facility along with a note. This letter is not about forgiveness. It's about resonance. That was the first one. Then came more. From Philly. From Kansas. From Alabama. From kids who'd run away. From sons who never got closure. From daughters who never got answers. From trans parents who left, came back, and were turned away. One girl wrote, "Your story makes me sick, but it also makes me feel seen. That's messed up, but it's true." Another said, "I was going to kill my dad. I planned it. Had the knife and everything. Then I read about you. I flushed it down the toilet. Not because I forgave him, but because I didn't want to be you." The prison staff didn't know what to do. The mailroom filled up. Some guards joked about it, called him the killer with a fan club. But most didn't laugh. Most just watched as Javon, week after week, opened those letters in silence. He never replied, but he read every word, sometimes twice. He started saving them, stacking them neatly under his mattress beside Marjorie's last letter. A new ritual, a strange shrine to a pain he couldn't name. And though he never said it out loud, something shifted. One night, a guard caught him standing by the slot in his cell door, eyes closed, whispering the words from one of the letters like a prayer. "You were born from confusion, yeah? But so was I, and I didn't kill anyone. So maybe you can still become something else." He didn't respond, but he didn't cry either. Not that night. Not yet. But the silence inside him was starting to sound different. Like something was moving. Like something was waking up. That night, Javon dreamed. Not the usual dream. Not the kind where the walls bled or the screams looped or his hands wouldn't stop shaking. This one was quieter. Slower. He was 4 years old again. Standing barefoot in the living room of that old apartment on Calhoun Street. The floor was cold. The walls were sunlit. Dust floated like snowflakes through the air. Outside the window, the street was empty. In his hands, a piece of construction paper, torn at the corners, folded in half. He'd drawn stick figures in crayon, one big, one small, both smiling. The words across the top were clumsy but proud. "I love you, Mommy." He stood by the window, waiting. The world outside stayed still. And then, footsteps. He turned. 2 people stood in the doorway. One was Marcus, tall, quiet, wearing a button-up shirt too big for his frame. His hands were in his pockets. His eyes were full of rain. The other was Marjorie, soft in a yellow dress, lips trembling, holding something tight to her chest. They didn't speak. They just stood there, side by side, like shadows cast by the same flame. Javon looked at them, eyes wide. The construction paper shook in his small hands. Neither one moved forward. Neither one left. They just watched. Watched him the way people watch something they know they'll never hold again. And the boy, the 4-year-old version of the man who would one day break, slowly stepped away from the window. He walked across the room, barefoot and quiet, until he stood between them. He reached up, offered the card. Marcus didn't take it. Marjorie didn't either. But they both smiled, just barely, like the memory of smiling still lived in them somewhere. Then, in the dream, the boy did something no one expected. He folded the card in half again, placed it gently on the floor, turned away, and closed the door behind him. The moment the latch clicked, Javon woke up, gasping, heart thudding, the taste of dust still in his throat. He sat up in bed, staring into the dark. The dream was already slipping, but the feeling stayed. Not forgiveness, not peace, something smaller, quieter, like the first breath after a storm, like the last note of a song that never had a chorus. He looked down at the edge of his mattress. The letter was still there, creased, blood-stained, trembling with time. He didn't pick it up. He didn't cry. He just whispered into the silence of his cell, "I see you now." And for the first time, the silence whispered back, "What do you think? Was Javon Myers a victim of betrayal? Or a killer who couldn't face the truth? Did Marjorie deserve forgiveness? Or did she return too late to earn it? Let us know what you think in the comments below. This is one of those stories that doesn't have a right answer, just 100 broken ones. If this story made you feel something, if it challenged you, if it made you question what love and truth really mean, don't forget to hit that like button. Subscribe to our channel for more real-life crime stories that don't just shock, they make you think. And please, share this video with someone who believes they know what justice is. Let them decide for themselves. Until next time, stay safe and stay awake.